Well, hello too. Today we are focusing on Ayurveda, educating Ayurveda to underprivileged communities. And to present this topic, we have a really special person who's been in education industry for many, many years, like almost like 2 decades or something. We have Dr. James Bailey, who is an Ayurvedic doctor, a licensed acupuncturist, a board certified practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, a yoga instructor, and many more. So I am super excited to introduce all of you to Dr. James Bailey, who is with me today, and he'll talk about how to do Ayurveda education to underprivileged communities in America. Welcome, Dr. James Bailey.
Thank you, Amita. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very blessed. Thanks.
So yeah, you've been doing a lot of online education. Well, before the COVID hit, you had physical education where you would go and teach Ayurveda and yoga to underprivileged communities. Tell us a little bit about why you think that there is such a need for underprivileged community to understand Ayurveda and yoga.
Well, I've done a lot of had a lot of conversations with people from diverse backgrounds. I've traveled to almost every corner of the world, over the many years of my adult life, learning as much as I can about the different kind of traditional healthcare systems from India, from Africa, from China, and so on. And so, I have a sense of kind of what people need, and I think that there is a greater demand for this type of wellness and wellness understanding and self-understanding within all communities. It's not just underprivileged communities. I think everybody's really looking for a deeper sense of how to take care of ourselves and also how to share this knowledge with others within their communities. But what we'll find many times in the underprivileged, what we call underprivileged communities, is really a lack of access. Because I personally come from the belief that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. So anybody can learn Ayurveda, anybody can practice Ayurveda, anyone can be a point of service in their community to teach them how to better care for themselves and how to eat more healthily and to really understand everything Ayurveda has. But for some reason, there seems to be some kind of a wall that kind of blocks access to this information. And I was, as I was explaining earlier, over the years, we've done a lot of marketing on Facebook, like Facebook ads for our trainings. And one of the big things that kind of jumped out at me over the years was every time I would post an advertisement for a training program, and we have 2 every year, I would get this enormous response from the Black and Latino communities. And yet when it came to actually converting or actually figuring out who was going to sign up for these programs, very few or really none of them would end up signing up. And it was just something I kept watching over the years about how the interest was there. If I got 800 or 900 people that said they were interested in something, out of that 800 or so, 400 of them were African Americans. Why were they not joining the training? Obviously, as I reached out to people to try to figure that out, it was just too expensive. And my programs are not as expensive as many others because they're online, right? And so following the protests of last summer, the George Floyd protest, the Black Lives Matter protest, I think for a lot of us, we kind of just, feel like we had to do something. We had to find out ways to kind of enroll, make this more affordable, break down those barriers of access so that the talent and the interest and the demand in these, underprivileged communities, if you want to call it that, could really access it. And so we started lowering our costs and providing scholarships, and then they started coming in numbers. So it really did come down, I think, had nothing to do with interest or demand. It had everything to do with the cost of the programs.
So that's great. So let's just talk about how Ayurveda can help, right? So we want to go to the little bit specifics. Now, you have studied Ayurveda as well as Chinese medicine and yoga. I mean, you are like, encyclopedia of everything. So why do you think Ayurveda versus acupuncture, Chinese medicine, is there a reason behind Ayurveda that you want to propagate Ayurveda over Chinese medicine, or you combine all these elements together?
Well, right now I'm just looking at interest and demand. I see. And right now I am more focused on Ayurveda than Chinese medicine. I had a practice in Los Angeles for for 25 years. You know, as a combination of Chinese medicine and acupuncture and Ayurveda. And right now, I think probably the demand for Ayurveda is probably peaking, if not continuing to grow. Acupuncture is still of interest to all communities, but I think it's sort of saturated. There's a lot of people already practicing. I think there's a greater demand than there is a supply for Ayurvedic education and practice. So what I'm really speaking to is more of like what I see in terms of the response in promoting these things to a larger outreach, and then is the access actually there? And what I'm finding is that it's not there. That Black and Latino people in our country are not really represented in the Ayurveda community. They're not represented on the NAMA board. They're not represented in NAMA certification. They're just not there. Mm-hmm. And yet what I'm finding is that it's not about it. The interest is there. It just isn't accessible.
Got it. And that's what we've been trying to do, right? We were talking before our sessions that, Nourish has been trying to do that accessibility, and we've been offering free education programs for the 1 year, every single day, whether on Facebook or Insta, and not only Ayurveda, but everything. So let's just talk on specifics on Ayurveda. Why do you think Ayurveda, people should be aware of Ayurveda? Let's just talk about the benefits, right? What does Ayurveda, in your mind, has that thing? Like we all know it's a personalized medicine, but what exactly it talks about? Let's just talk from that angle.
Well, I think one of the benefits that Ayurveda brings is that at least for people of color and underprivileged communities, is that the education can potentially be more affordable than some of these other programs like acupuncture, which are 4-year training programs. And they can those schools can cost you a minimum of $40,000 up to like $60,000 or $70,000 over 4 years. And so for someone who is kind of living on a lower budget, that just seems like an insurmountable hurdle to kind of get over. Particularly in the US, I think where Ayurveda has been, at least through NAMA and APNA, where they allow kind of different types or different tiers of education, you can get an Ayurvedic health counselor certification from NAMA or an equivalent from APNA at a much lower cost and with less time investment. It doesn't take 4 years to do that. So Ayurveda, I'm not saying or even implying that Ayurveda is any better or any more interesting or any more effective than Chinese medicine or vice versa. But when it comes to privilege and breaking down those barriers of privilege, some of the issues that you're going to run into is, what can I afford? How much time can I effectively put into a training like this? And if you can get a certification in, if we can get a certification in someone's hands to practice Ayurvedic counseling, for example, in under 18 months or so, for under $10,000, or even if you even if you discount it down to half of that or nothing, then you've got a much more you've got access, and people can start to apply those things to their communities. And all of the students that I've had that came from those communities over the years, I mean, when they're sitting there in trainings, hearing like, here's how you can apply nutrition to treat a number of health conditions that are out there, they just get excited because they just know what an impact this will have on their community. And it just isn't there.
I want to emphasize on that part. So let's just talk about, you said the impact on the community, specifically Ayurveda, right? And a lot of us, we know that Latino communities, or even, I'm not trying to specify Latino versus African American, but all of us, have this sad diet, right, in America. Most of us, I should say that, not maybe you and me, but most of us. So let's just talk about how Ayurveda can help let's just go a little bit, the framework of Ayurveda, right? So how can it help? That's what I want to talk about.
I think that what's going to make it affordable and accessible is the low cost of practice, number one. I mean, I'll get to your question in just a moment, but if it takes, a $30,000 investment to open a practice like it would an acupuncture practice or something, it's probably not going to happen. With Ayurveda, all it takes is a private space and a couple of chairs and someone with knowledge and someone who's willing to talk, and you can start educating and doing intakes and figuring out what people need lifestyle-wise, education-wise, and you can make huge changes. So the cost is low of practicing as well as of getting education. But I think to answer your question, you know, the nutritional part of Ayurveda is so well defined. It's so you know, advanced and effective and personalized. And that's really empowering to the people who need that information. And I think self-empowerment, particularly in the counseling side of things, you know, our program is a wellness counseling program. We don't do Ayurvedic doctor trainings. So our students don't need a full-on clinic to do this kind of work, you know. So that's good, because that's easier to manifest and to make, to build. But I think it really comes down primarily to lifestyle and nutritional education and empowering people to make these changes for themselves. And I think these communities, they're not really any different than any other community, but there are nutritional disadvantages in some of these communities. Lack of, you know, clean foods, lack of organic foods, or lack of, you know, less processed and more natural kind of foods. So getting people in the community to speak and advocate for healthier and better access to foods and healthier foods, you know, that they might play a role in that.
Absolutely. No, and Ayurveda is a personalized, right, system. So how would, so I think just explain us a little bit on a very high level. Like you talked about, Ayurveda has a very detailed nutrition system. Talk us a little bit about the personalization as well as constitution and how it relates to the personalized nutrition point of view.
Well, I think that that's universal to all practices of Ayurveda, regardless of the community.
Yes.
Ayurveda has a very clearly spelled out understanding about how nutrition and other practices like lifestyle adjustments, seasonal changes, but all of that is really done at such a personalized and in customized sort of fashion. Most Western sciences don't really have a grasp on the personalization of wellness in medicine. It's a lot of standardization. So it just doesn't dip into that level because, well, for one thing, it would take a lot more time to get to know each patient. You know, doctors don't have more than 5 minutes to spend with a patient. So they're treating your disease, you have a disease, and they know that disease, and here's the medication for it. But in Ayurveda, as you know, we take that extra time we take extra long intakes. You know, our students are taught to do 2-hour initial intakes and follow-ups. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I don't know how to stop that. People are calling me. I'm gonna turn my phone off. So people are trained in our programs to take that extra time to really get to know each person very carefully, to understand both the constitution and the types of imbalances that they're experiencing, so that the type of nutritional program they give is unique, and you'll never see two people with the same, you know, treatment or set of recommendations. And that's new for a lot of people in our country. You know, we're used to things being boilerplated, standardized, you know, trends like keto diets and intermittent fasting. They're, you know, you read the same book and we could do the same cleanse together, right? But you know, that's funny to someone in Ayurveda because we know that's not how the body works. And to take that information into underprivileged communities would be revolutionary, because each person in your family is so different, or they struggle with different health conditions, and your neighbor has a different constitution. So the remedies are all different. That's power. That's empowering.
No, I think you made a really good point, because we don't understand how we are all unique and how our body constitution is unique, and all of us go after like a keto diet or Atkins diet or what have you, and then try to fit into some kind of a structure, as opposed to understanding what is it inside us, and how can this personalized medicine system like Ayurveda can help us mold who we are, right? That's the difference. At least I see that. To your comments on that.
Yeah. I think you know, when I start my trainings in the spring and in the fall, a large part of the very first day with my students, I have to spend a good amount of time walking them through that paradigm kind of change from you know, my liver is like your liver, my digestion is like your digestion, and we're the same. So whatever diet we do, whatever the new hot trend is, we can all do it and we'll feel better. And it takes time for people to kind of let go of that notion. I mean, we are all the same in some ways. We are all human. Our DNA is all 99% the same. But at the same time, when it comes down to the individuality of what each of us have been through, both, you know, in terms of family line, in terms of childhood karmas, in terms of our social environments and where we live, and all of our needs are so radically different. So we
Yes.
can't, the solutions to our situations will never be the same.
No, I agree. So I actually want your comments on the fact that 23andMe, like, you know, DNA testing, and there's so many companies that are coming up, right? You, based on your DNA testing, they will tell what you should eat, the diet. So how do you compare that with Ayurveda way of analysis, the constitution analysis?
I really don't know enough of the 23andMe and their dietary recommendations to speak to it. I
Yeah.
really don't know. I don't know. I'm always a bit leery of any kind of generalized recommendation. You know, even Ayurveda has a few generalized recommendations, like eating cold foods is good for the Agni, you know, those kind of things. And we do
Mhm.
teach a few of those. But, you know, I think that any kind of recommendation that is, you know, recommended to more than one person should be looked at, you know, should be suspect, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
You know, like blood type diets and, you know, things like that. You know, your blood is part of you, but it's not all of you. Your DNA is part of you, but it's not all of you. It doesn't speak, your DNA doesn't speak to where you are now. It just speaks to what was before and what brought you to here. But now that you're here, what are you going through? You know, my brothers and sisters and I have probably as close a DNA as anybody I know. Yet look how different they are from me in terms of life experience, body types, you know, what they've been through, the types of choices they've made in life, and how that affected their body. So I don't put much investment into any of those kind of systems, really, like 23.
Yeah, okay. No, no, what I meant was gene testing. I did not mean to include, you know, 23andMe, something a lot of people know. But I think that what I understand is the Ayurveda, the way it's different is it's incorporating the mind, right? The science of the mind, what you, to your point, you know, you have brothers and sisters, but what you have gone through as a, from an experience point of view, so could be so different than your own brother or sister might have, even though your DNA is same or similar, I should say that.
Right. Well, that's just sort of a dramatic example of how the difference between prakriti and vikriti. You know, you and I could have extremely similar prakrtis, you know, even though we're from genetically from different parts of the world. It doesn't
Yes.
matter. We could have very similar. We are probably genetically 99% the same. And yet we could have such different experiences in life, our human experience, our day to day, the families we were raised in, the environments we grew up in. You know, these things can be enormously different and create very different body and wellness experiences or disease experiences. And we have, that's the part that really matters the most. I think the DNA does contribute a lot to both our constitution as well as to our some of the imbalances that we might experience or some of the vulnerabilities we might have in our health over during our lifetime. But there's a lot that can be done to offset that, and I think there's more, you know, that there's more to manage in terms of our differences than our similarities. You know, a lot of Ayurvedic doctors do their best to assess prakritis in people, which is really a reflection of the DNA and their genes, but they don't, you know, from all the teachers I've had, they don't invest as much into that prakriti part as they do into the vikriti part. And that's just basic, you know, natural medicine. You know, we treat what needs to be treated.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Explain us the difference between Prakriti and Vikriti. A lot of viewers probably don't understand what the difference is.
Well, from my personal understanding of it is that Prakriti is the way our body was designed by nature at the moment of conception, and then we went through some adjustments in the womb, and then by the time we were born, we're kind of born with a certain blueprint of who we are. You know, sort of in your genes will you know, with some impact from life and nutrition and so on, you're going to have a certain presentation of your body and mind that will be there. It's hard to say how much of that is true, particularly because it's hard to say how much of our life experience has modified that. But there's going to be a certain range, and then life is going to mold it into some direction following that. You know, we're going to have probably similar heights and body structures as our parents, but a lot of times our parents are very different, so we're not quite sure which one is going to show up more. But regardless, the prakriti is more of the mostly genetically determined, although with other factors like astrology and when you were conceived and the prakriti of your parents, those things will play a role too. But they're sort of the blueprint of who you are. And the vikriti has more to do with how that nature unfolds and whether or not it stays in that stable state of balance. And for many of us, in small or in large ways, it doesn't. Whereas, as I like to kind of teach to my students, it's really the difference between connection with ourselves and disconnection with ourselves. When we're really in connection, and if we're really well aligned with our nature and who we are, and we're listening to ourselves, and we're managing and taking care of we know what our body's saying, we can stay in that state of connection or prakriti. When we're not really in alignment with ourselves, and we're really in states of disconnect from ourselves, we're more likely to struggle and experience more health imbalances. So balance and imbalance, prakriti, vikriti, connection, disconnection, I think is really how I like to look at it.
I think it's a beautiful concept, just understanding what your body is saying and understand if there's any imbalance, and the concept of prakriti and vikriti explains this very beautifully in Ayurveda. How would you like to summarize our session today?
Well, I mean, I was hoping to speak a little bit more about, online and social justice and access to underprivileged communities, but I think we started out with that conversation. But I would just like to finish up by saying that if you are in any way interested in Ayurveda, if you have a passion or at least a piqued interest in what it is, and you don't think you can afford these kind of programs, look for opportunities, with Amita or with Savanti Institute. Find programs that value you and that value your passion. Because for me, that's all I care about. I have enough people who can support the program who are obviously privileged and can afford it. But don't let that stop you, because we're interested in your passion to learn about yourself, to heal yourself, and to heal your communities. And we want this in your community as much as you do. So, go out there, call us, email us, communicate with us, and we'll try to make it happen for you. Opportunities should be there. The opportunities are there, and we need to make it more available.
And we'll have another session on social justice. I just wanted to give a brief intro on how Ayurveda can help if someone is listening to our interview right now. So, but I think next session could be on social justice. But to your point, the way Dr. Bailey is talking about is we are committed, both of us, with Dr. Bailey and us, are making this affordable, making it accessible to as many people as possible all over the world. That is what our mission is, to make natural medicine accessible and affordable and, usable, like people should use it. At least that's where I come from. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you summed it up perfectly. It's there. It just, as I said, talent is universal. If you have a passion for this, you're going to have the talent for it. I'm going to make sure that you have the talent for it. And there's nothing that will prevent that. It's the opportunity that's the hurdle. So we're making it available. We're making that opportunity available. And I know you are too. So let's continue to keep that conversation going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Bailey, for being with us. We are making this natural medicine available and accessible and affordable to all of you. So feel free to reach out to us, and we will let you know when we are making that available as well soon. With that, I'd like to thank you so much and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.